Hey guys, it's Hayden here making another video. Today I'm going to talk about returning to work after psychosis or other traumatic event. Let's get into it. Welcome to another video, guys. If you're new to my channel, I mostly talk about my mental health and spiritual development and any insights I learned from my experiences. If that sounds interesting to you, then consider watching my other videos and maybe subscribing. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I do offer sessions. You can reach out to me on my Instagram or my email, which will both be in the description below. So I decided to make this video about returning to work after psychosis or other traumatic events because I saw it in one of the YouTube comments, and I think this is a great video to make because it's something that I've received a lot of questions about in direct messages as well, and I think it's something that is important to address. So I will say that returning to work after psychosis or any other traumatic event can be really overwhelming, can be really stressful. It can create a lot of pressure and judgment towards oneself. And so I want to start off the video by letting you know as best as you can, and I know this is hard, to be patient with yourself. It does take time, and it might not unfold in the timeline that you would ideally like it to. So I will say that everyone's timeline and everyone's process is going to look different for each individual, just because the nature of the trauma and the nature of the experience and the nature of the recovery is going to vary from individual to individual. But I will say, regardless of whatever process or experience you had, I would say most, if not all, of these points that I talk about will apply to your recovery, or at least you can use them if you'd like to. I will say that I'm not a professional mental health provider, so don't take any of this advice as professional mental health. This is just what helped me, so I'm just kind of recapping what was helpful for me in my development and what I noticed. So the first thing I will say is my first kind of keynote is acceptance. So realizing that you may not be able to perform at the same ability as you were before the experience, that's usually kind of the case, because if you had an experience that was very challenging and difficult, that's going to take a lot of your resources away from the things that maybe you were able to perform much more easily. Now a lot of your resources and investments and energy is going towards recovery and focusing on that. So you might not be able to perform at the level that you were able to before. And I can understand why that would be extremely frustrating, having all of that stripped away from you, when maybe that was part of your identity, or maybe that was the way that you supported yourself and your family. Any number of reasons why it can be very frustrating. That is really understandable, and that's a very difficult place to be. And know that just because that's the way things are right now doesn't mean that they won't be different in the future. So a lot of the first step is just understanding that this is where I am, this is what I'm capable of, and it's okay for me to be here in this moment and work on what's in front of me. So we have a tendency to kind of move into the future, think about oh, I need to be here, I need to be doing this, I should be doing this. And so just understanding that that might not be a possibility right now, that we need to focus on what you're able to handle. And part of that is acceptance, and then part of that is being realistic with yourself, which is my next point. A lot of people, regardless of trauma or not, will set really unrealistic goals for themselves, and kind of expect themselves to do things that they're not capable of doing. So I know that in my recovery process, I was kind of upset with myself to a degree that I wasn't able to work full time. There was a lot of judgment there because as like in my 20s, I really wanted to be able to support myself, and having to rely on my parents for support during my recovery phase was it didn't feel that great. It felt like I was being dependent on other people, which is not something I really enjoy doing. At the same time, that's kind of what I was able to handle. I could only work part-time, and that's what like my stress level was able to tolerate. And a lot of times when we're kind of recovering from these states of trauma, it's really important, at least from my perspective, to prioritize our well-being, especially because we're kind of in a more fragile state. We might not be able to handle as much stress. And for me, if the stress got too much, it kind of, I had to take extra rest to be able to recuperate for that stress. Whereas when I'm in more of a healthy state, I'm able to recoup much faster. So know that like you may be more sensitive to stress, and you may be more reactive to stress and more vulnerable to it. So really being realistic with yourself and understanding that you might not be able to do everything that you would like to do right now. My next point is gradual progress. So for me, I started with part-time job, and I picked a fun job that I knew would be enjoyable for me. It didn't pay a lot, but I was able to do something, and I was able to participate, and I didn't feel stressed when I came home. And I had control over my hours, so I was able to increase my hours if I wanted to, or I could keep them at lower if I wanted to do that. So I had some flexibility there, and I had some play, and that allowed me to kind of gradually expose myself to more demand. And a lot of this process involves listening to yourself, which is kind of like my next point. I kind of bridge them together. Flexibility and listening to how you feel, so being true to yourself. And I would say with the gradual process, or like the gradual thing, make sure that you are looking at your stress levels. I usually like increase my hours after having been at a certain hour point for a period of time, and I started to feel like less stressed, and I was like, oh, I'd feel less stressed, maybe I can like bump up my hours. And then I'd bump up my hours a little bit and then see how that felt for like a month or two. And if my stress was too much, which usually it wasn't because I was bumping up gradually, if it was, then I would basically like ride that out and feel how that was. And the more hours I put on, the longer time it took for me to like move up to the next level, just because like, that's just kind of how things work. So just being in tune with yourself and understanding what's right for you, because I will never be able to tell you what's right or wrong for you. You have to decide that for yourself, but it's really being honest, realistic, flexible, and making sure that you're doing it gradually. That's going to be helpful. I know that for me, I put a lot of expectation on myself and kind of judgment on myself for not being able to support myself, or not being able to work, or kind of a burden to some degree for other people, like particularly my parents, because they had to like support me financially. Just remember that our society puts a lot of emphasis on productivity and your ability to produce in order to be valuable to society. And I don't think that is a constructive way of measuring personal value. I think at every point in someone's life, they're going to be in a state where they're not going to be able to perform to the degree to which like society values, and your self-worth is not based on your ability to work or not work, know that it's okay to retreat and take time for yourself and to make sure that you receive the healing that you need. With things like broken bones and physical illnesses, there's much more of an acceptance with that. People who are also physically injured go through similar sort of insecurities as well, with not being able to work and not feeling like they're maybe valued. But I feel like other people are more accepting of other people who have a physical injury for not working. Generally, obviously there's exceptions. So just remember that just because our society values being able to be productive on the terms of society, that's not necessarily the only thing that brings value and worth to life, and it's definitely not the only thing that you have to offer. Just remember to give yourself that space and to understand that, like, just because you can't work doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not trying. It doesn't mean that you're not enough. It just means that right now in this moment, life is overwhelming, or life is more than what you're able to handle, in the sense that, like, you're maxed out. Your cup is full. The most important thing from my perspective is being able to figure out where your frontier is. So what are you able to work on? Where is your development at? So for you, if your development is not to the point where you feel comfortable volunteering or going to work, what is the next step for you in an accepting way, in a realistic way, in a way that's going to facilitate your recovery process? So if for you right now where you're at, it's just getting up and making sure you can provide yourself with a meal, provide yourself with some kind of activity that will help you to feel better and help you through your day, and to make sure you're getting enough sleep or something simple like that. Obviously it's going to vary for you, and that part is difficult for you, focus on that. If you're at a point where you're at 20 hours and you feel comfortable with that, maybe the next step is bumping it up to 24, 25 hours. And so understanding that it's not really about where you are that determines the value and the quality of you as a person. It has more to do with, like, where you are, understanding where you are, and understanding what steps you can take next and focusing on those. I feel like that's where the growth happens, that's where the progress happens, and that's all we can really do as individuals, whether we're healthy or whether we're sick, or whether we're experiencing trauma or whether we're not experiencing trauma. The only thing we can do is evaluate how many resources do I have and what am I able to do next, what step am I able to take next. So remember to take time for yourself. Remember to give yourself times of rest. I know there might be financial pressures out there to get back to work, but do the best you can to have moments of enjoyment and moments of peace, because it's not always about being productive. It's not always about reaching the next destination. Sometimes it's just about being present and just being okay with where we're at in the moment, which I understand can be challenging, especially in these circumstances. But that's kind of what I have to say about returning to work. I know it's not an easy process, and I know it takes time. So be patient, be kind to yourself, and know that things can change and things can evolve over time. It just might not happen exactly the way you wish it would. So All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope that video was helpful for you. If you have any further questions or feel like I missed a certain aspect of the topic, let me know, and I will make sure to respond to you in the comments below. And as always, guys, make sure to seek your truth and to take time for yourself, and I will catch you in my future videos. Bye for now.